Hi, my name is Emily and I'm 23 years old. I thought the day I graduated would feel like freedom, like a door opening to all the dreams I had quietly carried inside me for years. Instead, it felt like I walked straight into a room with walls already built around me. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, like it, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. I can still remember the sound of my name being called during the ceremony, the cheers, the clapping, and the way my heart raced as I walked across the stage. For a brief moment, I believed my hard work had finally brought me to a place where I could breathe. I had studied late nights, cried over deadlines, and sacrificed weekends with friends, all for this piece of paper that I held proudly in my hands. That night, lying in bed, I told myself, now it begins. My life. My choices. But life doesn't always wait for you to catch your breath. Just a week later, my uncle invited me over for dinner. He had always been respected in the family, successful, outspoken, the kind of man who never left room for anyone else's opinion. Growing up, he had sometimes helped my parents when money was tight. I knew my education had been easier because of him, though no one ever spoke about it openly. I walked into his house that evening with gratitude in my heart, ready to share my dreams, maybe even ask for advice about the future. Instead, I walked into a trap I never saw coming. "Emily," he said after dinner, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. "Now that you've finished your studies, you'll start working at my company." I blinked at him, unsure if I had heard right. "Your company?" "Yes," he replied, as if there were no other possibilities in the world. "You'll help in administration. It's the least you can do after all I've done for this family. And of course," he paused to sip his drink, "you won't need a salary. You'll learn from me. Think of it as paying back." The words landed heavy in my chest. No salary. Paying back. Duty. They rang in my ears like a judgment. I tried to smile politely, but inside I was crumbling. I had dreamed of starting my career in a place where I could grow, maybe even find a path of my own. I wanted to prove to myself that my degree meant something, that I was capable of standing on my own 2 feet. But here was my uncle turning my graduation into a debt I didn't know I owed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice telling me what my future was supposed to look like. My mind wrestled between gratitude and fear. I thought of the times he had helped my parents, of the way everyone in the family looked up to him. I thought of my mother's smile at my graduation, her eyes shining with pride. How could I now turn around and say no? Wouldn't that make me selfish? The following days were a blur of tension. My uncle began calling me, asking when I would start. I avoided his calls, pretending I was busy, but the weight of his expectations pressed down harder each time my phone lit up with his name. At night, I sat by my window, staring out at the quiet street, asking myself questions I couldn't answer. Was I ungrateful for wanting more? Was it wrong to dream of independence when family had sacrificed for me? When I finally gathered the courage to speak to my parents, my voice shook. "Mom, Dad, Uncle wants me to work for him. But he said, without pay. I don't think I can do it." They exchanged a look I couldn't read. My father cleared his throat. "You know how much your uncle has done for us, Emily. Maybe it's only fair." Fair. That word broke me more than anything else. I wanted fairness too. Fairness for the nights I studied alone, for the hours I poured into building a future. Was my only role now to repay? I didn't argue that night. I didn't cry either. I just sat in silence, realizing that even my own parents weren't fully on my side. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers began. A cousin casually mentioned to me, "Uncle said you don't want to work with him. That you think you're too good for us now." Her words cut through me like a knife. I felt exposed, like my reputation was being rewritten without my permission. The girl who had worked hard for her degree was now painted as selfish, arrogant, and ungrateful. And the worst part? I hadn't even spoken my decision aloud yet. My silence was being filled with his voice. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone that I wasn't ungrateful, that I simply wanted to build a life where I could stand on my own. But instead, I swallowed my words, too afraid of being cast as the villain in my own family. At night, my chest ached with the weight of it all. I journaled furiously, trying to make sense of my emotions. I wrote about freedom, about gratitude, about the fine line between love and control. Some nights I ended my pages with anger, other nights with tears. And then, one morning, staring at my reflection in the mirror, I realized something. My uncle's version of my life would never let me breathe. If I stepped into his office unpaid, I would step into years of silence, always under his shadow, always proving my worth by his standards. I couldn't do it. I whispered to myself, "No, I can't." The words felt like both betrayal and salvation. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how my family would react. But deep down, I knew the storm was only beginning. The morning after I whispered no to myself in the mirror, something inside me shifted. It wasn't courage yet, not fully, but it was the beginning of a line I knew I couldn't cross. I decided to call my uncle, my heart pounding so hard I thought he would hear it through the phone. "Uncle," I began, my voice trembling, "I appreciate everything you've done for our family. But I can't work without pay. I need to build my career independently." For a long pause, he said nothing. Then his voice turned sharp, colder than I'd ever heard it. "So this is what gratitude looks like? After all I've invested in you? You think you're above family now?" My throat closed, but I forced myself to repeat softly, "I just can't." He hung up without another word. That single call was enough to turn my world upside down. By the weekend, the whispers spread faster than I could breathe. A cousin texted me, "Why would you embarrass Uncle after everything he's done?" An aunt cornered me at the grocery store and said, "Children these days forget who raised them. Shameful." Even neighbors who had no part in the story, greeting me with tight smiles that carried judgment. Family dinners became unbearable. I would sit at the table, pushing food around my plate, while conversations swirled around me like a storm I wasn't allowed to interrupt. My uncle told stories about young people who forget their roots, glancing at me between bites. Laughter followed, but it wasn't warm. It was sharp, cutting, and meant for me. My parents stayed silent. That silence hurt more than words ever could. I wanted my father to say, "She has the right to choose her future." I wanted my mother to place a hand on mine and whisper, "We're proud of you anyway," but instead they avoided my eyes. Their silence screamed louder than accusations. One night after dinner, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I turned to my mother in the kitchen. "Why won't you say anything? You know I can't work for him like that. You know it's not fair." She sighed, her shoulders heavy. "Emily, we're caught in the middle. He's helped us so much. If we go against him, we'll lose everything." Her words shattered something in me. "So I'm the sacrifice then? My life is the price for peace?" She didn't answer. She just dried her hands and walked away. That night I cried into my pillow until my chest ached. I wasn't just fighting my uncle, I was fighting the story he was writing about me. A story my own parents seemed unwilling to correct. I felt small, unwanted, like the more I tried to explain myself, the more invisible I became. But pain has a strange way of teaching you strength. A few days later, my best friend called me after hearing the rumors. Unlike my family, she didn't judge. She listened. I poured everything out, the guilt, the shame, the loneliness. When I finished, she said quietly, "Emily, saying no doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means you're protecting yourself. Don't let them convince you that love equals obedience." Her words lit a spark in me. Maybe I wasn't wrong. Maybe boundaries didn't erase love. Maybe love could exist without chains at the next family gathering. I sat quietly while my uncle once again made a remark about youth with no respect. Everyone chuckled. My cheeks burned, but this time I lifted my head and met his eyes. "I respect you," I said softly, my voice steady. The room fell silent. But respect is not the same as surrender. I won't work without pay. That's my decision. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. My uncle's face hardened, and I knew my words would not change his opinion. But something inside me unlocked. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. The rest of the evening passed in strained silence. Some relatives avoided me. Others whispered behind my back. But I no longer felt crushed by it. I had finally spoken my truth, even if no one clapped, even if no one stood by my side. Walking home that night, I felt strangely lighter. Yes, I was still judged. Yes, my parents were still distant. Yes, my uncle would probably never forgive me. But I realized something powerful. My worth wasn't up for negotiation. I thought back to the night of my graduation, when I had believed the world was opening for me. That dream wasn't dead. It was simply waiting for me to claim it. Even if the path was lonelier than I had imagined, I didn't know what jobs would come next. I didn't know how long my family would see me as ungrateful. But I knew this. I could no longer live in someone else's shadow dots, so I took a deep breath, let the night air fill my lungs, and whispered to myself again. But louder this time, no, it was the price of saying no. And it was the beginning of finally saying yes to me. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, like it, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from.